Your alternative talk radio contact. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
With infinite complacency, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Hello.
Hello, Willis. How are you? This has been a long time coming because Max Hawthorne brought you up some time ago to me and said, you guys should talk. Willis has stories. So thank you for doing this.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. Well, to begin, my first UFO sighting was it was when I was serving in the U.S. Army in Vietnam. I was there for part of the year in 1970, and then up until November 2nd of 1971. And this incident, to the best of my recollection, would have happened in the spring of 71, around April, May,
Mm-hmm.
I was off duty. And like quite a few times, when I was off duty, I would be at the beach. There was this beautiful white sand beach near a place called Herky Hill, the Air Force cantonment area. Anyway, I was out there with a couple of other guys. It's been so long I do not remember their names, but they were also Army personnel, okay? Junior enlisted like I was.
Mm-hmm.
And we were out there at the beach, and I remember it was kind of late in the afternoon, but by no means getting dark. We were standing there, and I remember the three of us. I was standing in the middle, and we were kind of looking out at the water, the ocean, and it was just gorgeous that day. And suddenly, to my right, I saw what appeared at first to be a daytime meteor. Now, if you picture the top half of an old dial-type clock, I noticed it when it was about at the 2 position,
Mm-hmm.
and it was angling down across the sky just like a meteor, real fast, heading for the horizon, the surface of the sea, and I just had time to follow it for a split second with my vision, and suddenly it stopped for I'd say a 2 count. 1, 2, just as an orangish blob of light, and then it started moving again, like meteor speed, only this time it's angling from its position to the left down toward the right. It got close to the surface of the sea out there in the distance, and then just sort of was gone, like a meteor would wink out of vision. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, if it hadn't stopped, I would have thought it was 2 separate meteors.
Right.
But it actually stopped, like I said, for about a 2 count. And I was just standing there, sort of surprised and stunned. And I remember turning my head to my left and my right, looking at these other 2 guys I was with, and they looked very, the modern term would be kind of creeped out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember the guy on my right said to me, Willie, what was that? That wasn't no shooting star. Just like that. And I said, I don't know. I don't know what that was. It wasn't anything I'm familiar with, and we hadn't heard any noise, So, we were pretty surprised about it. Well, we went on about our business, but I could tell it was kind of on their minds like it was on mine.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, I brought it up to the officer in charge of the S3 section where I was assigned, fellow named Major Lucas. Never forget that guy, very intelligent. But I asked him what it could have been. I told him exactly what I'd seen, and he said, well, the only thing it could be is either some kind of experimental aircraft that I sure haven't heard anything about, or it might have been a flying saucer. He said a lot of strange things over here in Vietnam, and just left it at that.
What was your reaction to him giving you those two options, and do you lean more towards one or the other?
He seemed kind of surprised that I had seen something, and when I say major, he wasn't a really old fellow or anything like that, like some people would picture.
Right.
The Vietnam War wasn't like that. If I remember, Major Lucas would have been, maybe early 30s, 33, 34 years old.
Mm.
Been around some, of course, and a very intelligent man. I mean, he was in charge of the, training and operations section there. And I was just kind of a green kid at that point, 20 years old. So I thought about it, and, I accepted his assessment, either or. Personally, I lean toward UFO because it stopped so fast and then took off again so fast. If it was some sort of experimental craft, it was a really good one. We'll put it that way.
I mean, okay, so I know that the guy, one of the guys next to you verbalized something. He's basically like, what in the world was that? What about the other guy? What did he say about this incident?
I honestly can't remember. I mean, we didn't discuss it a lot, Shannon,
Yeah.
but, I mean, it's been, spring of 1971, long time ago. But I do remember that the three of us were pretty well mystified by it, Initially, as I said, I thought it was a meteor, and when he said that about it not being a shooting star, I would imagine that's what he thought it was at first, too.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just say this, I sure hadn't had anything to drink or smoke. Even that sort of thing, was prevalent over there in Vietnam.
Right.
I got to admit it. I mean, I was stone cold sober, and so were the other two guys. I know it wasn't some kind of a hallucination or anything like that. I saw what I saw.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
My total sighting of the thing was, counting the stop and everything, not even 3 seconds. Just swish, 1, 2, swish, like that.
That's all it takes, though, right? And then here we are all these years later, and you probably can see it just as clear as day, as you did that day.
I can. I mean, I could just envision that instant when I saw it. It's the only thing I could liken it to would be when I was working out with my weights in my living room a few years ago when I saw the second plane hit the tower.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like clear as a memory could be.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to liken it to, because I think we can all remember exactly where we were when we saw the second plane hit and how you felt about it, right?
Yeah, it was a shock. Those shocks like that sort of stay with you.
Yeah, they do. See, but that's all it took was those 3 seconds. Of course, like you said, if it hadn't have stopped and took off again, you would just be like, well, that was a cool meteor I saw in Vietnam all those years ago. Or maybe you wouldn't even think about it because it wouldn't be something strange.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't even remember it with all the other things that was going on at the time, But now the second incident,
Now, hold on. Before you go on, I just want to say before we move on, I have the utmost respect for people that are in or were in the military, so thank you for your service. And now the air around UFOs is so much different as the years have gone on. Now, you said that Major Lucas was, you highly respected him. He's a very smart guy. I mean, if he was a different person, if it was a Major Smith or whatever, and maybe you had a different relationship with him, would you have reported it to a different major, or because maybe you thought Major Lucas might be a little bit more open to talk about this kind of stuff, or open to even having you ask, that's why you went to him?
Yes, yeah. He and I always had a real good working relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he just seemed to be, how do I put it? A no-nonsense, but good-natured, very fair-minded sort of officer, not blustery at all. As long as a person was doing their job well, he wouldn't bother them. He just would stay out of their way unless something came up that required his supervision.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I went to him and mentioned it, just to get his opinion, you might say, and he gave it to me. And, up to the point where he had mentioned that it might have been some sort of experimental craft, I hadn't even thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
But, he, as I did, seemed then, as I do now, to lean toward the UFO, the extraterrestrial or unidentified craft. So,
because he did kind of say to you, yes, I have heard, or there are some things going on. I mean, it was a time of a lot of strife, and there's war going on, and all kinds of things flying around the sky that were carrying all sorts of weapons, and we've heard of things possibly off-planet being interested in, especially nuclear sites and times of war. They're seen a lot. I know Mac Maloney has an entire book. I think it's called UFOs in Wartime.
yeah.
I mean, did you ever hear of any of your fellow officers or anybody else that was out there speak about another sighting that was strange?
Not of UFOs or experimental craft. One thing I can tell you for sure, though, is I heard many stories from people coming in from the bush, up country particularly.
You mean like the
about
rock apes?
Rock apes.
All right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I never personally encountered any rock apes, but I heard so many stories, Shannon, you wouldn't believe it. It's been many long years. I cannot give any specifics, but I do know that I heard stories upon stories from guys who I considered to be trustworthy and truthful, telling me that they had encountered them, had things thrown at them, been pelted with rocks, dung, anything you could think of, these things could pick up, they would throw. The screeching and howling, they were described as being very aggressive, sometimes upright walking apes about the size of a 10-year-old American kid or a young teenage Vietnamese kid. And they were definitely not described as being human or close to human. If they were some type of unknown hominin, they were pretty far down there on the evolutionary scale.
Right.
And I never heard any accounts of giant rock apes. They were always described to me as being, as I said, about the size of a 10-year-old American kid or a young teenage Vietnamese kid. But they were very aggressive.
Willis, do you remember how, and I know this is a long time ago, so I apologize for some of these questions are probably annoying because you're going, it was a long time ago. Do you remember, once you got to Vietnam, how soon, or had you already heard of the rock apes of Vietnam?
If I I can't remember if I had heard of them rather, before I went there. It's possible I did, but I know shortly after I got to Vietnam, I started hearing the stories about them. You see, most of the time I spent in Vietnam, I was assigned what they call permanent party at the 22nd Replacement Battalion at Cam Ranh Bay. Now, if I remember correctly, most of the people coming from what we called the world at that time into Vietnam, most of them came through 22nd Replacement at Cam Ranh Bay, where we received the flights, we assigned personnel as needed by their military occupational specialties in country to various locations. Mm-hmm. And at that time, practically everybody that was coming out of the field, going back to the United States, came through Cam Ranh Bay.
Wow.
So almost immediately after I got there and was assigned, I started hearing stories from guys coming back from the bush about rock apes. You know, guys would talk about firefights they'd been in, or, you know, officers they had served under, either good or bad, and some of the things they'd seen out in the field. And since I'd been kind of fascinated with cryptozoology since I was a 9-year-old kid, seriously, Dr. Ivan Sanderson's first article about Bigfoot came out in True magazine when I was just turned 9 years old.
Yeah.
And I've been fascinated with that sort of thing since. Well, since I was interested in it, I would listen to their stories and ask them questions. And I wish I'd had the foresight to write all that stuff down while it was being told to me. But, you know, I told you the basics of it. The size, the aggressiveness, you know.
Something that seems to be a vein across the rock ape story is, for the most part, they are, of course, seen. That's how we have descriptions of them. But for the most part, they really just like to stay hidden and throw, like, whatever they can find. Like you said, whatever they can get their hands on. I mean, how many of these guys that you talked to actually laid eyes on a rock ape?
Oh, well, I can't tell you how many. I would say that half the guys I talked to, at least half of them, claim to have seen them.
Wow.
Oh boy, it's been so long.
No, that's okay.
But I heard more than one story. I'll put it that way. I heard more than one story about somebody shooting a rock ape, and guys who had claimed to have either shot them dead or seen dead ones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if that was, you know, over here, and then we had the, like you said, you mentioned the word foresight, you know, to actually bring a body in or something. I know that wasn't what they were there for, obviously. It was a time of war, and it was a lot of other things going on, but holy cow, they actually would see dead ones.
Well, let me just interject this too, Shannon. Now, this was quite a long time ago, and I've actually had people I've talked to about this before ask me, well, how come nobody took pictures? Well, in that day and time, nobody out there in the field was going to be carrying a Polaroid camera, for instance, around in their rucksack.
They were already heavy enough, right? I mean, why add more if you don't really need it?
And, you know, with a regular camera, you know, a film loading camera,
mm-hmm.
there were small film loading cameras available at that time. You could buy one at the PX if you were lucky enough to have a PX. But the problem is the film. I mean, you might be out there at Firebase wherever for weeks and weeks at a time, and you're carrying this film around, and, you know, when you finally get to a PX, well, I remember even where I was at, if I turned my film in at the PX to have it developed,
mm-hmm.
I'd be lucky to get those pictures back in a week.
Right.
And for a guy who was out in the field, and, you know, carrying that film around and finally dropping it off at the PX someplace and then hoping to get it back the next time he got to the PX, whenever that was, maybe weeks in the future. It was just not practical at the time. There are probably somewhere, though, I would almost bet money on this, somewhere in, you know, old envelopes full of developed pictures that guys brought back from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably sitting in somebody's file drawer or somebody's attic right now. There are pictures of dead rock apes. I would just about bet money on that.
Wouldn't that be incredible? And I never even thought of the photograph angle of that, but just like you said, the logistics behind that. I mean, and some of those guys being in Vietnam, I suppose certain times of the year, you were probably just constantly wet for just weeks at a time. Sure. And then again, it's not exactly a waterproof situation where you can just whip out a camera and, hey, there's a dead rock ape. But obviously this was something that was talked about so often that it sounds like they would get back to your place in Cameron Bay and then just want to unload the stories. They just wanted to tell somebody, right? Everybody wanted to talk about this.
Oh, sure. I don't doubt that a bit. You know, I didn't realize it at the time. You know, like I say, I was a 20-year-old kid, you know.
Yeah.
Not much experience there, you know. But, you know, looking back on it, I'm sure that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
They wanted to just tell somebody before they left Vietnam what they had seen and maybe hear somebody else's story about what they had seen and experienced. Well, that would be interesting if I had the connections to do it. To just do a book about, no joke, that sort of thing, cryptid stories from, you know, rock ape stories, cryptid stories of any kind from the Vietnam War, the actual stories from guys who were there, boots on the ground, what they saw and experienced.
Well, you know, be careful what you wish for, because we could put the PSA out right now, and I could have people contact me, and I could forward them to you, and you can start working on that rock ape book, huh?
Oh, my God.
We'll get you busy. I'm fascinated by the rock ape stories. I haven't talked about them in a really, really long time. I think I haven't really covered them since I was on with Will Jevning. We talked about the rock apes a long time ago on Sasquatch Chronicles. But, I mean, I know that, you know, you were 20, you're just kind of getting into this whole thing. But when you were there and these guys are coming and they're telling you these stories, were you just, and again, I realize this was not some fun time and these guys are probably just happy to be still alive and coming back to base. But were you kind of like, oh man, I wish I was out there in the bush. Maybe I would get to see a rock ape, or was that not really on your mind so much?
Well, to be honest with you, I considered myself to be very lucky where I was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where I was for most of my time in Vietnam, I was assigned there, and it was almost like a civilian job. True, I was wearing a uniform, but I was working 7 days a week, anywhere from an 8-hour to sometimes a 12-hour shift, 7 days a week, handling things. I always had hot chow, you know.
Yeah.
My hooch was comparatively free of creepy crawlies.
Yeah.
So I was pretty glad I was where I was at, but it was still fascinating to hear the stories from the guys who'd been out there, you know, up country and out in the bush about the things they'd experienced and the things they'd seen. And, you know, I totally, even then, I could tell when a guy was pulling my leg,
mm-hmm.
you know, so I discounted some of the stories, but there were a lot of them that really rang true, and these guys weren't trying to John Wayne it at all. They were just describing something they had experienced. So,
do you remember any, and I promise we'll move on after this. I'm sorry, I'm already, see, I told you, I warned you, I was like, I'm going to have questions. This is my last thing about the rock apes, and I know you want to talk about the Juneau, Alaska incident. Do you remember any, and I know you, details I know are going to be few and far between, and that's okay, but do you remember anybody talking about either they were actually quite terrified of these things, or that they were in danger, or was it more just an annoyance, or they couldn't go to sleep because they had crap thrown at them all night, or what was the general tolerance of that?
That was basically it.
Yeah.
They weren't afraid. They weren't afraid of them because they, the way they described it, it seemed like it was almost like being, how do I put it, irritated by an animal more than endangered by a predator.
Okay. Yep.
Right. The guys, I'll put it this way: when these guys were out in the field, what they were worried about was the Viet Cong. They were worried about what Charlie was doing, not what some rock ape was going to do. But I can well understand, the annoyance. I mean, the noise factor. The fact that there's this animal, ape, whatever it is, out there throwing things and hooting and screeching and carrying on, and then of course there's the added fear, you might say. It's like, well, if these rock apes make too damn much noise, Charlie's going to know we're here.
Right. I didn't even think about that aspect of it. Yeah, because they finally stop moving for the day, or they find a quiet place to bed down where they think they're relatively safe. And now you have these, let's face it, damn monkeys or animals making all the racket and keeping them up. Yeah, that would be an annoyance. And I suppose, they get close enough, and if they're the size of a 10-year-old child, then obviously it's not a situation like our Pacific Northwest Sasquatch to where you'd have to have an Uzi to take it down. They're carrying decent enough weapons to take care of something like that.
Right, sure. One round from an M16 would drop one of these things like bad habit. It's just the idea that they're out there, and, I'm sure that they weren't all visible. I mean, if you picture the jungle of Vietnam like you've seen it in the movies or the old newscasts, one of these things could be literally standing 20 feet away from you and throw something at you, and you couldn't see them for all the foliage and, so... They were pretty much an annoyance, I'm sure. Just a weird critter, another thing that you had to worry about and deal with on top of everything else.
I was going to say, on top of all of the other crazy stuff going on at that time. Holy cow, those guys were going through it all. No, thank you for bringing that up. I actually had that jotted down once I learned that you were in Vietnam, you were part of that whole thing, and we were talking about your UFO sighting. So thank you so much, Willis. Sorry for the detour there. Let's talk about Juneau.
Juneau. Okay. This one happened, I'm going to say it would have been end of August, first week of September, right in there, 1998. I had gone on a picnic with a gal friend of mine, and we were out at a place called Auk Bay Recreation Area. Everybody called it Auk Rec, okay? Nice sand and gravel beach north of Juneau. Anyway, we're out there, got there mid-afternoon, late afternoon. We're having, our picnic snacks and whatnot, and it was a bit chilly. Anyway, we had a blanket leaned up against what you call like a berm of earth on the beach there, okay? Mm-hmm. And we're leaning back on it just like, a couple of people leaning back in a double recliner, talking and shooting the breeze as it's slowly getting darker and the stars are starting to come out pretty good. And, we're talking about all sorts of inconsequential things, her job, my job, gossip around town. And I remember, again, all of a sudden, up in the sky, as I'm leaning back, to my right, I see what I originally thought was just like lights on the undercarriage of a large aircraft, okay? Picture like a Delta wing setup. Central point, 2 lights slanting back one way, the other 2 lights slanting back the other way, all right? And it appeared to be traveling pretty high because we could not hear any noise at all, but it was also fairly large. And I'm thinking, what the heck is that? You know, I remember thinking that's either one hellacious big plane but then why am I not hearing anything? I'm watching it. I didn't know if she was at that time or not. I'm watching it, and the central point of white light stops. The 2 on either side sort of peel off, and as the central point keeps moving slowly on either side of it, the other 4 points of light are just doing all sorts of fast, crazy, angled maneuvers. I mean, just like, it's tough to describe. They are just moving around in patterns with really acute angle turns, all 4 of them, 2 on each side of the central point of light, and they are just moving fast, zip, 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 doing these angled turns. And she said to me something along the lines of, what is that? You know? And I said, I don't know. Just keep watching. We'll see what they do. You know, again, I was pretty well mystified, and I'm thinking there is just no way. You know, I thought this was a plane, and it sure isn't. And this went on for, I'm going to say, 2.5, 3 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's a long time.
They were just zipping around, and she said several times something like, how in the hell are they doing that? I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out myself. And she said, well, that sure was an airplane. No, it's not an airplane. Just let's see what they do. Well, by this time, the central point had moved past the median of the sky, you know, and all of a sudden, all of the other 4 lights resumed that delta formation. 2 on one side, 2 on the other side of that central point. And once they did that, they all started speeding up a little more, and then phew, they were gone. It was just like they went from slowly accelerating to, you know, if you were watching Star Trek, you remember when the
warp
Enterprise
speed
would go to light speed?
Yeah.
They were just gone.
And they all matched the speed.
Time, yeah, and about that time, she punched me in the shoulder and said, let's get our stuff and get out of here.
Probably a good idea, right?
And I said, well, yeah, I don't know why we got to get out of here so quick, but let's do it. So we get all our stuff together, throw it in the car, start heading south back toward town. And she was acting pretty creeped out, stunned, surprised. She said, what do you think that was? What do you think that was? UFOs or what? And I told her, I said, look, I am not sure what it is, but, you know, I told her basically the same thing Major Lucas told me. I said, there's two choices here. It's either some kind of UFOs beyond our understanding, or somebody has some sort of experimental aircraft that's about 100 years ahead of anything I've ever heard of. I remember telling her exactly that. And she said, what the hell would they be doing up in Alaska? I said, well, what would they be doing anywhere?
I guess it would be a good place to test an experimental aircraft of sorts, because there's far less people in Alaska to see it. Yeah.
Now, there again, we discussed it a couple times in the following week, but I had no other answers for the gal. I said, we just happened to see something really strange. I said, personally, I'm leaning, toward it was UFOs, and I don't know how they did what they did. I said that, there's nothing we've got or any government that I've heard of has that could do those kind of high speed, maneuvers. The more I thought about it, the gravitational forces involved in those maneuvers would have killed anybody on a manned craft,
Right.
as far as I know. But anyway, there was another case, I mentioned to a friend of mine, real good friend, a hunting buddy of mine I'd known for years up there, that I had seen these things, and I'm not going to give his name or anything like that, but he told me that he had once seen a UFO in Juneau at fairly close range. He said, honest to God, he said, I saw it rise up above the trees, and I could literally see what looked like porthole windows in the thing before it took off. And, he was a no-nonsense sort of guy, so I thought, well, I sure didn't see anything that close, but, what I saw was appearing as points of white light, but much greater distance. So we just kind of left that alone. And I really didn't mention it to anybody else.
Yeah. What about the fact that both of your sightings are over massive bodies of water?
Well, I just don't know what to say to that.
Yeah, you just hear theories about underwater bases, and a lot of that is quite far out. But then again, we also can core out entire mountains and put massive structures and buildings, and people could live in there for the rest of their lives if they needed to. Oh gosh, now of course it's going to fall out of my head. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, you hear the theories on the underwater bases, and it does make you wonder, could we execute something like that here on planet, or are we in fact still talking about something off planet? And of course, what are they doing here? And it opens up a whole can of worms. But the idea of the lights, why would they need lights? But then again, maybe the lights are a byproduct of some kind of a propulsion system or something, but that's all just guesswork. People like to say they know exactly what's going on with that. I don't know how. It's kind of funny to me. But also the portholes, right? That your friend mentioned, that's also very strange. Maybe aliens, they like to look just like we do out the windows. I don't know.
Could be. Don't know. Yeah, just mentioning what he said at the time. He didn't say a lot about it. He didn't describe it really, except, he saw a UFO and rose above the trees, and, as it was going away, he said he literally saw what appeared to be portholes in it. So I don't know. I wished I had, in a way, I wished I'd seen something close up, but what I saw impressed me enough.
So you do feel lucky then to have seen what you have? Yes,
I do. I really do. And to those people who don't believe that these phenomena exist because they've never seen anything of this nature personally, well, they're entitled to their opinion, but I've seen it. I was there and I saw it. And I know that what I saw was something out of the usual, out of the ordinary.
Are you always looking up or trying to get yourself to a beach, so that obviously everything happens over the beach, over the ocean for you? Maybe you need to find a beach more often.
I wish. I wish. I'll say this, Shannon, I turned 69 last week.
Oh, happy birthday.
And, well, thank you. And, I just hope that some authoritative source comes out and spills at least part of the real story before I pass on. It would be very good to have some official revelation, shall we say. I mean, I know that, I'll say I suspect strongly that there are some aspects of this phenomena that they're never going to reveal because it would probably cause mass consternation, maybe even panic. But it would be nice to have someone of sufficient authority finally come out and admit we're not alone in the universe, and this planet has been visited and or interacted with by other beings for a long time. Sure looks that way to me, doesn't it to you?
See, and yeah, I absolutely, and I completely agree with you on the aspect of, depending on what level of disclosure. But if they came out and they said, yeah, there are aliens. In fact, we have had some bodies here and there in different locations, different bases. Maybe we have some dead, maybe we have some alive. Imagine if, these reptilian or mantis creatures turn out to be real. Or one of the real terrifying aspects, like these abductions. And some say that we've allowed some of that to happen. It's some kind of a treaty with aliens, and you can, the quote-unquote alien, whatever beings that might be, because there's supposed to be many of them. I completely agree with you that there would be a panic of sorts. People would stop going to work. In fact, we know we're weak. We're very emotional creatures. We're very used to, we don't like change. And that would be absolutely earth-shattering, no pun intended. I'm not trying to go for the ID4 look here, but don't think that a lot of people would process that well at all.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we've got a little time left. If you are up for it, are you okay to tell your passed on friend's cryptid story?
Oh yeah, this is a quick one. This fellow I knew pretty well. We went through the apprenticeship program for the Carpenters and Millwrights Union. That's one of the things I've done in my life. We went through that back in the late 70s, and we worked quite a few jobs together. Sometimes he was the foreman on my job, and sometimes I was the steward on his job. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we always got on well, even though he was a little younger than I was. Anyway, one day we were just talking about things, job stuff in general, and he mentioned the fact that he knew that I'd always been interested in the various unusual phenomena and read a lot of books about them, that sort of thing. Yeah. And he then proceeded to tell me about what he saw one night. He was driving back from another friend's house, not far from where I live right now. I've been on the road he mentioned many times. It's right here in Pekin, Illinois. And he emphasized to me that he was sober and just heading home at the end of a long day. And he turned a corner, and as he went around this little curve, and I could just sort of envision the exact spot that he was talking about, he saw something in the headlights up ahead, run out into the road, and just stopped standing there looking at him. And he told me that about 2 car lengths ahead of him, right in his headlights, was a little man. He said it was not a child. It wasn't some kind of fake doll or anything, he said, because I saw it run out there and it was looking right at me. It was a little man about 2 feet tall. And he said it was dressed in brown and green clothes. He said not splotchy like camo, just brown and green. And it looked at him for a couple of seconds, like right in the headlights, like a jack-lighted deer, I believe was what he said. And then it took off running from the middle of the road into some high grass and low brush on the other side of the road, like it would have run from his right to his left, and down into this little, well, like a gully area that was pretty brushy. He said he came out of that car like a shot, ran over there to see if he could catch another look at it, but, he heard it kind of rustling through the brush, didn't ever see it again. And he got back in the car and he said to me, Willie, I was so scared. I was so shook up. He said, I could barely drive home. And I asked him again, for any pertinent details. And he said, it happened so quick. But he said, I swear to God, if I didn't know better, I'd have thought I saw, a leprechaun or something. And I asked him, I said, did it look like a dwarf, squatted down like a dwarf or a midget? real squat and stout. He said, no, it was just like a little man, by which I took it to mean it was like a normally proportioned adult human. He said, but that damn thing was 2 foot tall. It wasn't even as tall as the hood of my car.
Oh my goodness. I mean, you told me it was a cryptid story. I was not expecting this. I love this story. I love this.
The guy wasn't joking with me, Shannon. I mean, I could tell, he was kind of reliving it as he told me the story.
Oh my God, I would never go camping again. I'm not bothered by Bigfoot, but I don't want to see that. Oh, no.
Isn't that weird? And you would have had to have known this guy. I mean, he wasn't a BSer. He wasn't a leg puller. He liked to joke once in a while, but he wasn't this kind of a practical joker that would just tell me a BS story. He really believed that he had seen a little man, like 2 feet tall, dressed in brown and green, run across the road and stop and look at him for a couple seconds and then take off running again. And, I should have asked him at the time, like, if you'd been able to catch this thing, what the hell would you do?
Yeah, do you have the cat carrier with you to put him in? I mean, what do you do with him? Oh, God.
But, that kind of creeps me out there. I could imagine, and I almost thought before he started this story that he was going to tell me he saw some kind of animal.
That's what I was waiting. Bigfoot? I was waiting for Bigfoot.
Yeah, but to see a miniature human being dressed in clothes, that was pretty weird, And
did he say that was it barefoot? Did he see any shoes on the thing?
No. He didn't specifically say barefoot, but I took it to mean that it was dressed like a person. I should have asked him that if it was barefoot, but there again, you kind of picture looking at something 2 feet tall.
Yeah.
You're sitting in your car and you're looking out there. He might not have even seen its feet.
Yeah, right.
I'm not sure.
Oh my gosh. I was not I would be so done. I would not, I hear stories like this. I've had a couple different stories similar to this. And actually, I don't know if you've listened to some of Pam's FRAY episodes, but some of the ones that she has seen are dressed very similar to what you just described. It's not camo. It's just like it's made for the woods. It's just of natural colors.
Something to help you kind of blend in. Like the only thing I could liken it to was, back in the olden days here in the United States, long hunters and mountain men usually wore clothes, at least when they were out in the field, you might say, that would blend in with woods. The greens and browns and that sort of thing. Nothing real bright that would stand out and catch the eye of hostiles, Yeah.
I would
make them a little easier to hide.
I gotta say, that is on my no list. I don't think that I would process that very well if I saw that. And just knowing that it was going from one side of the woods to another side of the woods in the dark.
Well, no, you don't quite understand. I'm talking about literally in a residential area.
Oh, God, I thought he was out on some rural road in the middle of... Oh, God.
This is literally in a residential area. The area I'm talking about, though, there are houses with, fairly large yards. I mean, it's a nice neighborhood out there. Houses with fairly large yards, and there's houses on the left-hand side, but that one particular spot he told me about, there's a gully running along there behind some of those houses, and when you get to that last house on that side, there's just almost like what you'd call a sort of a brushy, high grass vacant lot down into that gully. But, at that spot where he saw this thing, you only got to drive about a block to
Oh,
one of the
gosh.
main streets of our town, one of the main thoroughfares. So this was like right in, you know, a residential
Okay,
area.
I
So
take
this
it back.
thing-
That's way worse, because what was he doing? Was he going up the house? Can you imagine going downstairs and looking out your back door and seeing that thing like cupped, you know, hands on the glass looking in? Or you'd be done. You would just be.
Well, yeah,
you'd be
pretty
done.
much. I'd be grabbing for my pistol. is what I'd be
Absolutely.
doing.
Where's the buckshot
the
for
hell?
that thing?
You know, for all I know, I mean, you know, I'm just speculating here.
Mhm.
That thing literally could have been cutting across somebody's backyard,
Right.
run across the street into that brush, you know, high grass, down into that gully, and gone. Who knows where?
Oh man.
But
What the hell is it
yeah,
though? What is that
that
thing?
that was the thing that I think creeped him out the most, was just the
Mm.
idea. It's like, okay, it's something that initially looked familiar, but damn, it's 2 feet tall.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can picture it in your mind. I mean, how shocking that would be. Quite frankly, I would process something like a Bigfoot much more readily than I
Absolutely.
would that.
Yeah, that's on my no list. That would freak me right out. And then it was bad enough when I thought we were in the middle of nowhere, but no, he's just checking out backyards or hopping
Yeah,
fences
yeah.
or whatever he's doing.
Exactly.
Oh my
Exactly.
gosh.
It's like, yeah, just like you said, if you happen to look out
Mm.
your backyard some evening and they're in the lamp from a street light or the
Nope.
neighbor's garage light, there that thing is standing there in your yard.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Yeah, you're like, who
crap.
conjured this thing up? This thing is straight from Hades, you know? Like, well, that's not,
Yeah.
that's not right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. Rod Serling time. Cue the music.
yeah.
Anyway,
Oh, I was not expecting that. I was like, oh, a cryptid story. I love, it's one of my favorite things, but then, I mean, I love it. See, this is why I don't like to always hear things before I learn of things before I hear them, rather, because I am truly surprised by this and I love it. I'm not always very surprised on this
I
show.
was too. I was too, like I said, I expected him
Yeah.
to talk about some sort of an odd animal he'd seen that maybe I'd be able to explain away, but
Right.
there was no explaining that away.
He's probably like, what you got for that, Willis? What do you got?
Yeah,
I
and
got
I
nothing.
again, I could tell that he really believed that he had seen this thing. So
Mm.
there you go. Just one of those really odd ones. It reminded me, when I tell you the truth, I told that story to Max
Yeah, what did he say about that?
quite some time ago,
Mm-hmm.
and he recounted to me that story about the
fairy.
flying
Mm-hmm.
creature, the fairy that he saw.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget what I said at the time, but it sort of leads one to believe this. It's often said that stereotypes exist for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a corollary to that would be all these legends that have come down, all these stories about the Fae folk, etc., that have come down to us through the ages. There has to be something behind those stories.
Do you? No, I completely agree.
There has to be some basis for those. All these different cultures around the world can't have been having the same, mushroom dreams. There has to be something to it. Maybe, these stories were embellished over time. We don't know. But there have been so many millions of people down through the ages who truly believe that these inhuman or infrahuman creatures exist. There's probably something to it. I suspect there is, anyway.
Do you think, though, that it would take a certain kind of person, whatever that thing is, inside that person, or an ability that they have to actually see that? You know, like, I wonder if you were going around that same corner, or if I was going around that same corner, would we have seen that at all? Or would it look different to us? Or, you know, I wonder about that too.
I don't know. I sometimes wonder if some people do have an ability or a predilection to see these things or experience these things, you know, like, just like some people claim to have clairvoyance or be more prone to have problems with ghosts and spirits. Not sure. I could tell you something about that too, but we're almost out of time. Suffice it to say, I mean this very sincerely. I once lived in a haunted house, but now don't laugh, I once was in a haunted house, but was able to use a ceremony, you might say, that was given to me by my late friend, Edgar Price, E. Hoffman Price, the old-time pulp author, to sort of make peace with the ghost and, you know, make a lot of the little ghostly manifestations that were bugging me go away. No, dead serious.
No, I completely believe you. I hear about this stuff all the time. It sounds like a lot of the people I talk to need that same a ritual or, you know, whatever incantation he gave you.
See, what happened was I moved into that house in, I believe it was the first part of June, 1975, and just immediately started having odd things happen. You know, as a bachelor, and, well, let's just say odd things happened that bothered me. Well, the next month, a friend of mine and I took a trip out to California by car, and while out there, we visited, you know, a pen pal of his, Edgar Price, E. Hoffman Price, who was at that point, I think, 75 years old. Ed had been around. He was one of the last surviving members, even then, of the old-time pulp writers group. He personally knew Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, those type of people. You understand? He was friends with them. So I asked him about that and several other things, and he suggested this type of ritual. Now, you know, he'd been a Buddhist for many years, and maybe it had something to do with Buddhism. I don't know. But he mentioned this type of ritual, told me how to handle it, and in effect make peace with the ghost. Let it know that it was welcome in the house as long as I was welcome in the house, and we could coexist. And I did it, and it seemed to work. But still, from time to time, there would be little pranks played on me, just to let me know it was still there. I moved out when I got married to my first wife in the latter part of February 77. And to my knowledge, it's still there. I found out a few years back in talking to some of the neighbors that lived close by that house that there had been some pretty frightening things happen in that house, to the point where there was at least one family that just left at high speed, you know, and came back in broad daylight to get their stuff and just moved somewhere else.
Oh, gosh.
So,
well, I mean, I guess at least it didn't follow you. I mean, I feel bad for the other folks, but at least it didn't follow you.
No, it didn't follow me. You know, the funny thing about it was, and, you know, this, I remember Edgar telling me this when I brought it up, told him about all these things. He said, Bill, how old is that house? I said, well, it was moved, along with several other houses, it was moved from its original location to a new foundation out there where it, you know, where it was when I moved into it. It's a long story, but anyway, it was moved. And I said, near as I can tell, that house would have been built somewhere around, you know, 1905, 1910, you know, just a working class house back then, and it's been upgraded a little since and all. And he said to me, well, Bill, you know, just about any house in this country that was built before 1960 has had at least one person pass away in it. And he said they didn't used to send people to hospitals to die when a person's health situation became grave. They just let them go home to die with family members taking care of them, that sort of thing. And, after I had told him about the ghostly manifestations I encountered, he said to me, you need to check into the history of that house. He said, because it sounds like what you've got there is a classic poltergeist. I would say, he said to me, his opinion was that it was the ghost of a child or maybe, an early teenager, somebody who wasn't really malicious. They were just sort of playing pranks and tricks.
Right.
And yeah, I agree with his assessment of that. But
yeah,
anyway,
the house I'm in now is only about 10 years old, but just for fun, I went to the diedinhouse.com website just to see, for fun. And no one's died in this house, at least according to that website. But it does make you wonder, as far as what he said about certain houses that are of a certain age and who may have died within, or maybe a few someones, and what they were up to before they died and their mental state. And some of those things can certainly hang around.
Mm-hmm. That could be. And, one other thing, just as an aside, my grandmother was born in 1899. And I remember one time, well, more than once, her telling me stories about, for instance, the great influenza,
mm-hmm.
the Spanish flu, back in, 1919. And she still, she would be sorrowful about it when she told me these tales of people that she had known from around the neighborhood, people she went to school with, people she went to church with. And she told me that we got pretty hard hit here in my hometown. She said back then when the flu was going around, about every fourth house you saw in her neighborhood
mm-hmm.
either had a black wreath on the door or a quarantine notice.
Right.
She said it was really rough on kids and old people, but she said it was so quick you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I think she said something right along these lines. A person would wake up feeling fine Monday morning. By Monday evening, they'd be real sick, and by Thursday, they'd either be past the worst of it or dead.
Yeah, brutal.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't have time for normal procedures. It's just like, make sure they're absolutely dead and bury them.
Yeah.
Because they were trying to keep down the spread of the disease. And I'm thinking, boy, now, there again, how many people passed
mm-hmm.
away in houses, and yeah, we could go on about this all night, this sort of thing, but yeah,
you've had some wonderful experiences, though. I mean, I would hazard to say that all except for the one that you relayed from your friend, I would love to have myself. So, I don't want to see that little dude.
That is the one that was really creepy. That would be like going into your bathroom and lifting the toilet lid, and there's a face looking back at
God.
you.
Oh, now you got me thinking about that old movie, the Ghoulies. That was the cover of the movie poster. Do you remember that one? It was the little green man with the sharp teeth with it popping out of the toilet.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Boy,
that's on the no list. Well, Willis, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. It's been long overdue. We've been talking about doing this for a very long time, so I thank you. And I thank you for that surprise there at the end. I was not expecting that kind of a cryptid. I love that story. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, if you ever, trust me, if you ever hear anything of that nature
mm-hmm.
again, please let me know.
I certainly will.
I really would like to know if anybody else, particularly anybody in the Midwest, had ever experienced anything like that before.
Well, did you hear, I think it was the first episode that I had John Olson on. I will double check and I will send it to you. But in his book, Stranger Bridgerland, that was the first book. I think that was when we covered
Strange what?
Stranger Bridgerland. I can send you the link. That'll be the easiest thing. But
Yeah,
it was
please,
within
please.
that episode that he took a story down from a man that was camping by himself, of course. Poor guy. He was out in the middle of nowhere, though, unfortunately, and he had one of these actually come into camp, and he knew it came into camp because he woke up, and it was holding the book that he had been reading the night before and had fallen asleep with it right next to his head. And he woke up, and it was sitting on a log with his book. So if that's, again, not another no thank you, I don't know what is. So, yeah, I'll send you that,
Wait,
though.
you mean a miniature human like that?
Yeah, another like a troll or something like that. But yeah, another mini something. But I'll send you that. I'll send you that link, and that way you can check that out.
Please do.
All
Well,
right.
you have a great night now, and take care.
All right. Thanks, Willis.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. when you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.